It is an adjustment, isn't it? Yeah, no, actually, that makes sense. Yeah, in order to like keep it going. If you're like having a hard time sleeping, you can put it on slow, and then, yeah. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. So, welcome to the new conglomeration of. I guess this used to be my 8th period class. Now this is my 4th period class A-Day, right? And this is really cool because we're bringing you all together, and we've got 3 new additions. Actually, 4 and 5, because we've got some that were in my 7th period class as well. So it's a pretty big group. This was actually my 8th period classes were among my smallest. Very, very cozy, good learning environment and so forth. And I expect the very same continue on as we go through the remaining 10 and a half weeks of this school year. I know it's weird because it's like today kind of felt a little bit like the first day of school. It's kind of like, oh, I haven't seen you forever. And then you're like, oh, God, that's right. I don't have near as much free time as you did when you were in in the summer. Or before the break when, at least in my class, we did everything in class, and I didn't do all the Zooming and so forth like that. I still only get you 80% of the time, but we're going to be going on full tilt. We'll get started. Go ahead. You can start a new section in your notes. Civil rights and the courts. Very, very important unit. The reality is there's another unit that I was going to include in this semester. No way to do that, but we'll be able to incorporate some of those components into this one because the other unit focused on the historical movement of the civil rights movement with some really good stuff, but time will not allow for all those various different things, but we will get all the civil rights and the courts and politics, although we had a fair amount of that. That'll be the very last unit. We had a fair amount of that when we did the presidential election, and it always pops up. I mean, it is always popping up. So, still continue taking the notes. Pods. I mean, seriously, does anybody have any questions about the pods? Because when I heard about it all and so forth, it's like, oh my gosh, I hope the students are able to figure this out because, you sit next to mostly the people who you are sitting next to. And then hopefully, I don't know, did it work out okay in your elective classes? Oh, that's right, because you guys don't have IB electives yet. Oh, okay. So you just had some different, have you had math? Yeah. And so you got a little bit of, differentiation in math because you guys aren't all in the same math, are you? Mostly? Oh, hey, no name calling. I don't know the way she said it. That was really a nice thing to say, Lizzie. See? The way I said nice wasn't very nice. So to clarify a few other things, especially for those of you guys who haven't been here, we wiped down the desk after the end of class, okay? What? That is unfortunate. So here's the deal. Wipe them down in class at the end of class. Some of you guys are very diligent because I noticed you wipe them down like when you first come in, which is a very, very good thing. We'll actually finish up at 2:45, so I don't have to keep you in here for advisory after school. Which we just found out about yesterday, and you guys got to find out about today. So keep on top of all your classes so you don't spend 15 minutes of your lunch break doing advisory. Stay up on top of those things, okay? So wipe down the desk, and you'll be able to get off to your classes. Just to clarify on certain things, yes. Very good, Gabe. Gabe is demonstrating a very effective way of wearing a mask. Yay, okay? And the masks are required because you guys are breathing in air in closer proximity than you were before. So you have to keep it safe. Shh. All right, so let me finish. And And Max, what was one thing that used to be allowed in here, but it's out of my control? Food. Yeah, that sucks. So, so I'm sorry. And unless Owen can get like something in writing about how to liquidate some granola bars or something, the only thing you can have is you can have a beverage. So you like pull the mask away. Okay. Oh, you already did it. That was fast. Okay. Take a step and then move on. Is that fair? There's a rule. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. Robbie, am I okay with you spilling things in my class? No. So no spill. Okay. It's better to have like a container that has like iced tea in here, so that's better. Okay. Yeah. And another thing is, I mean, it's just like make it work for me because I really did actually like the smaller sizes and the sense of managing. And it was a little bit easier at times because it was not as difficult as people really want to kind of chime in a conversational way. You ever been in a conversation where they had lots of people being like, oh my gosh, but that person just shut up because they like are dominating and it's really annoying and so forth. Did everyone write their little namey on there and so forth? Thanks. Well done. Good job. Faithful servant. Okay. So, yeah, just work with me on this. I think it's going to work out really well because I'm enjoying teaching and I've got really good stuff to teach you guys up here. You want to pay very careful, close attention. I am still making the recordings because I have 2 10th graders who are still taking the class from home, so I'm going to continue posting those. That's actually good news if you want to review or if you're gone for a day and so forth. The 11th graders are all back. There was just one more, and he was in class today, so I'm not going to make more of those. So too bad to all of those subscribers who like listening to my 11th grade. Why, you want me to keep doing that for next year? Oh my God. Did you know that actually there's people like this guy who's like, hey, adjust the camera because I'm getting too much of the overhead lights and stuff. It's hurting my eyes. I get more views than I actually have students. I'll consider it. I mean, I will be doing the 10th grade one for sure. The only one is the 11th grade and, I am not John Green. John Green is awesome. John Green is like... You're also awesome. Well, that's very kind of you to say that. But John Green has got like a graphics department that is just none other than. Yes? Oh, really? I don't remember saying that. Did I say that? I don't remember saying that. Did I say that? Really? My voice is kind of like good? It's like a radio voice? Okay. No, I don't think I'll do that. We're going to need to move on, so yes. Okay. Shh. No, I'm not going to be doing the daily warm-ups. I'm not going to do the formative question at the end. We're going to go, because we're already having to cut some things out. Shh. I'll entertain a little bit of this, like questions and commentaries, and welcome back. Yes? From you. Okay, yes, thank you. What? I have no idea what she's... I don't know what it is. ASMR. Victoria, since I'm a little clueless now because of my agedness, can you send me an email with a link so that I can find out? And I appreciate, Owen, I really do appreciate people who look out for me and don't send me down some dark alley when I'm all of a sudden Googling something and then all of a sudden I get all these ads popping up for things that I don't want. Yeah. Oh, it's not that bad? Okay. I'll trust you. Yeah. Good. I will. Well, I'll see if my trust is deserved, is warranted. If not, my faith. Right. Okay. Is it safe? Is it safe? DSMR? ASMR. I don't know if you get the wrong letter, it could be something completely different. Like weird. All right. You guys ready? Okay. Let's cover a couple things. Quizzes. We got a whole bunch of quizzes for you. Basically, one a week for the next 4 weeks. Okay. The textbook is not too hard to read, and it doesn't have lots of things that I always use, but this particular unit has got stuff on civil rights and courts, and so there's 4 chapters. The first one I just gave you, chapter 11, and I've already posted them in Google Classroom, right? Because you guys are subscribers to Google Classroom, and those are coming up every week, and they're like 10 or 15 points. Yep. So here's the deal. Some of you guys have figured this out already. If you want to automatically be eligible and get the retake, like extra points and so forth, which turns out to be 10%, so either 1 point for a 10-point quiz or 1.5 points for a 15-point quiz, do like the folks have been doing at home as their requirement, a couple of sentences about each one. Just do it automatically. I've got some seniors that are already doing that automatically, so they actually literally just turn it in on the day of the quiz, so it's done. They prepared for the quiz that way, and then they got the extra retake opportunity already there. So it's points. Okay, you guys are doing pretty good, even though the Constitution test was okay. Wasn't too bad. Wasn't too crazy hard, I don't think. I mean, the grades varied a bit. There is a retake opportunity for that. And I posted that on Google Classroom as well. I think there was a couple of essay questions that I was having people do in lieu of taking the test if they were not actually physically in class. And so those essay questions are the retake opportunity. If you can get those into me by the next Friday, not this week, but next week, and I've got that all posted on Google Classroom, you can do that. I imagine quite a few of you guys are probably not going to do that just because you feel pretty good so far with how the grade's going. Okay? But it's not a bad idea to give yourself a bit of a cushion. Because this, oh my gosh, this unit, have you flipped through? There's a lot of stuff in there. And you think I'm going to put like a whole big massive like matching sections and so forth where I list off like, McCulloch versus Maryland, Marbury versus Madison, Morse versus Frederick, Hustler Magazine versus Falwell. It's a very important First Amendment Supreme Court case about a pornographer who makes fun of a right-wing preacher. Yeah, so that's a very interesting one. We're going to be coming up with that one. Yeah. Kelo versus the City of New London, Columbia versus Heller. These are all going to be on that test. So it's going to be a bit of a doozy. So you'll need to know stuff by the time we get to the end of this unit. It's good stuff. It's very important stuff. I like this unit. Okay? So, but be reading the chapters and getting ready for the quizzes as we go along. So they're going to be popping up pretty much. I think I've got them set up for you guys, that'll be every Tuesday starting next week. Okay? Questions on that? Okay. Have I missed anything? I think we've got everything. Good. Okay. Everyone's got that. Give the rest of those out tomorrow. Okay. Got the attendance. And let us begin. Okay. Got the handout in front of you. We're going to bounce around a little bit on this first part. This unit, which covers chapters 11 through 14, and the judicial branch on the front side. And quickly thereafter, when you get onto the second side, we get into civil rights. And it's like, boy, we're going to get hot and heavy very quickly as far as these civil rights and stuff. One of the nice things about this class, this particular unit, is you don't have to rely entirely on like the textbook. You have in front of you somebody who used to be a lawyer. Caden is a future lawyer. You can hire him. I don't know, what kind of cases do you do? Do you do criminal defense? Are you a tort lawyer? Do you know what torts are? And don't say they're on the breakfast aisle. Yeah, right next to like the cereal. Yeah, those are Pop-Tarts. No, you don't know what they are. It's okay. Raise your hand if you know what a tort is. If I was walking along, like not being very careful and accidentally hit, would that be a tort? The answer is yes, it would be a tort. That would be tortious behavior. You're like, why are you talking Latin? Tortious behavior is when somebody is not very careful. Oh, so in this, we're going to be getting into civil liability. In fact, I'm going to give you a crash course. Sorry, John Green. We're going to give you a crash course on law school, because once upon a time I was in law school up at the University of Idaho, in Moscow, Idaho, for 3 years. And I became an attorney for 4 years. And I did some criminal prosecution, so I never did the civil side, but I worked in the courts, the Idaho Supreme Court for 2 years, and 2 years as a deputy prosecutor, so doing criminal cases. So I will tell you, as part of this unit, some stories from my experiences to help elaborate on some of the things that we're going to be going through. Okay? Courts. It's very important to understand how the courts work, because through the courts are we going to be handling a lot of these civil rights issues. They pop up all the time. And most of the time, the most important component of your civil right, or whatever the Constitution says, is, I don't know, who are the most important 9 people in the United States of America when it comes to determining what the Constitution says or doesn't say? Very good. The United States Supreme Court. Who gets to appoint the Supreme Court? Very good. Yeah. Can Biden appoint all 9? Oh yeah! If what happens if they all die or retire during Biden's presidency? How many, Ivan, do you know this? How many members of the Supreme Court did President Trump appoint? 3. 3. Which is a lot. Yeah, no, 3. Which is a lot for a one-term president. Okay? Barack Obama was in there for 8 years. You got 2. George W. Bush was in there for 8 years. You got 2. Bill Clinton was in there for 8 years. You got 2. George H.W. Bush was in there for 4 years. I want to say he got I think he got 2. Jimmy Carter was in there for 4 years. He didn't get any. Nobody died or retired on Jimmy Carter's watch. Yeah. So this is going to be very, very interesting. The United States Supreme Court is very, very important, which is why not only in this unit are you going to need to know stuff you knew in the last unit, like, what does your Second Amendment give you? A right to do what? Bear arms. Yeah, and you're like, yeah. Raise your hand if you think the Second Amendment is a good amendment to the Constitution. There you go. Raise your hand if you think it's overrated, Yeah, it's like, anyway, brings up some interesting issues and so forth. Yeah, it's like, but raise your hand, here we go, raise your hand if you agree with the United States Supreme Court decision in the Heller case. Okay, raise your hand if you like the Second Amendment right to bear arms. Keep your hands up. Do you like the decision in the Heller case? Oh, there you go. The Heller case, which you'll be writing down later on when we get to it, is the United States Supreme Court decision. Oh, look, page 3. Actually, I think it's even before page 3. Yes, no, page 2. Civil rights, asserted civil rights, the right to maintain a state militia, right to bear arms, District of Columbia versus Heller, 2008 interpretation of this 22nd Amendment. It's the interpretations of these amendments that are going to be very, very important. In 2008, before 2008, the United States Supreme Court did not say there's an individual right to bear arms. Before that, the Second Amendment was interpreted basically as something to do with states and their ability to form up a militia, basically a National Guard unit. But the District of Columbia passed a law which basically banned all handguns from anyone in the city limits. And Heller was like, I think that goes too far. Because I've got a house, and I want to protect my house, and I'm a law-abiding citizen, and so I should be able to have that. So he challenged it through the courts. His case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled, hey, you're right. And it was the first time that they recognized an individual right to bear arms. Before that, it was interpreted differently. Okay? So the Supreme Court's interpretation of these things is really, really important. Yes, Joe Biden's a very important person. Donald Trump was a very important person as the President of the United States. Members and leaders of the House and Senate are very important people. But in this unit, you're going to discover how very, very important the members of the Supreme Court are. And some of those ones that are in there, like, can someone tell me, let's see if I've got that on there. Oh, I don't have it on there, but I got it on one of the slides. If you were born in 1972, let's say at the beginning of the year, just for the sake of argument, how old would you be right now? 49? That's as old as the most recent Supreme Court Justice appointee, Amy Coney Barrett. 49. Okay? Who did she take the place of? Ruth Bader Ginsburg. How old was Ruth Bader Ginsburg? She was in her 80s, yeah. She was in her 80s when she died. Yeah. She died. She could have resigned. She died. She was on the court. The justice appointment replacement from Trump. 49 years old? She's going to be there for a while, given typical life expectation. One of 9 people interpreting the United States Supreme Court, the United States Constitution. And you must know this, Chris. If you don't like an interpretation of the United States Constitution, you could just amend the Constitution, right? I mean, why bother trying to get the Supreme Court to change its mind? It might not. I mean, it takes a while. Usually change membership. What does it take to amend the Constitution? What do you mean you don't know? You were watching all these videos. You saw all of the haranguement and harassment. Oh, no, Ed did it in every class. Victoria, what does it take to amend the United States Constitution? There's 2 parts. To get the proposal out of Congress, what percentage is required in the House and the Senate? That one. Yeah, you know this one. It's 2/3. And what about Senate? It is also 2/3. Chris, back to you. Then what fraction what fraction of the states needs to agree to ratify to make it finally that amendment into the Constitution? What fraction? That's correct. Is that easy? How many times has the United States Supreme Court, the United States Constitution been amended? Twice! Wow! We've got the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. That's it. That's it. We don't need any more amendments than that. Oh, Victoria's got it. 27, yeah, 27. The 27th Amendment is very forgettable. Yeah. So the first 10, Bill of Rights. Boom. And then there were another 17, and 2 canceled each other out. What did that have to do with? Yep, alcohol. Yep. Yeah, the alcohol one. What was it? Yeah, alcohol. 18 and 21. 18 and 21, that's right. All right. Yeah, it is ironic. All right. So anyway, this unit is chock full of very important things. We're going to start with the law, and then we will be diving very soon into rights. We'll give examples. We'll have discussions and so forth. I appreciate you raising your hand because we'll bring those in. Sometimes I might put off extraneous questions because sometimes they're very relevant, but sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, really? But a lot of times it will actually work out pretty well. Because Robbie's like, he told me to wait until this next unit to ask the question. So this is the time, especially when we get into like criminal justice stuff. Yeah, what if they do this? Yeah.
How far does the power to interpret the Constitution go? Like, could they say, I interpret that the First Amendment was never supposed to be there?
Well, this is a very good question. And this is the basis of upon which I have students at times write essay questions. If you flip over, actually, if you go to the very bottom of page 1, Judicial Activism, okay? And the concept is going to be carried over, Judicial Activism, and I've got it, I think a list, yes, and I've got it above there as well. Judicial activism versus judicial restraint. Some people look at the law and the courts and they basically say, let's not get in the way of public opinion. Let's let public opinion and elections and the people who get elected make very important decisions as far as what the law is. Other people are like, voters are stupid. They can't be relied upon. The majority will vote to kill Socrates. In Athens, Socrates was a bit of an annoyance. At the particular time, they took a poll and they said, you dead. And he's like, well, that's what the law says. The people have ruled. And he drank hemlock and he was dead. Okay? So sometimes there's going to be folks that are like, majority is a little dangerous. And so they will, in positions like, I don't know, can you think of a position where if you're appointed, you're there for the rest of your life? Oh, the Supreme Court. So if you're on the Supreme Court, you can look and go, we're going to interpret a very, very important document, the United States Supreme Constitution. And we're going to say that as we read it, this is here. This is going to be a very important thing that we look at because a very controversial issue. I've already highlighted it already. Raise your hand if you have an opinion on the issue of abortion. If you have an opinion on the issue of abortion, which is like a lot of Americans, hands down, whose opinion matters most on the issue of abortion? Ours. We can vote however we want. If we want this, all we need to do is vote in a president, and that takes care of it. No, it doesn't. Raise your hand if you can tell me. This is probably one of the most well-known Supreme Court decisions. What is the most famous Supreme Court decision on the issue of abortion, which said that it is in the United States Constitution? Roe versus Wade. Okay. The last time that issue came up, it was a very close vote. And it was a 5-4 vote on the issue of abortion. And I expect that another abortion-type issue will come up and present itself to the United States Supreme Court probably within the next year or so. And it could be a different outcome than it has been, say, since 1973, I think it was, when Roe versus Wade was first announced. Yes, quickly. So, yeah, if you need to use the restroom, get me attention, then I'll basically say quickly and then come straight back. Because you do need to be here. Because... yeah, in fact, yeah, Robbie, play this part. Okay, Robbie, when you're watching this at home, play this part or get the notes from somebody. All right? Okay, so we got a big picture.
So that means that they can't just say that in the Constitution we ignore this now?
That's very cynical. Are you saying that the Supreme Court, they have to be careful of it because if they say something like, I don't know, once upon a time, it's not in the unit, but once upon a time, you guys should remember this from last year if you were in my ninth grade class. Raise your hand if you can tell me. What was the Supreme Court case that said, like, literally, state law doesn't matter? So if you have a state law that says no slavery, and some white guy from the South brings his slave up into that non-slave state, that white guy still gets to keep his slave, says the Supreme Court, throwing out all of the law that northern states had basically banning slavery. It was the Dred Scott decision, and people in the North are like, what? Stupid Supreme Court. You've stepped into this mess. And there was other stuff that led to the Civil War, Part 1. Let's not have Part 2. Okay? But yeah, the Supreme Court, there's going to be sometimes people are like, yeah, you tell them, Supreme Court, because can't touch that. It's really hard to touch a Supreme Court decision. You got to get the Supreme Court to change its mind. Write this down. Supreme Court does not change its mind very often. It's very rare. We will talk about probably the most famous example of it where they said, oh, yeah, allowing states to like segregate between blacks and whites, that's not okay anymore. So that was a big change, and we'll talk about that case. But most of the time, their decision sticks. And a constitutional amendment process to try and change that, good luck with that. So some people like that. Other people are like, this is really controversial. So I have found teaching this particular unit that students come in not knowing that much just because it's all this like hoity-toity law and courts and Supreme Court. Who knows about that? And they come out of it like, whoa, right in the midst of a very big important issue. One of the reasons why some people vote for who they vote for president has to do with, well, what if the other person got to pick somebody for the Supreme Court or vice versa? Okay? It's important stuff. All right. Let's get to the basics. And as you look through here on the courts, you ready? I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things. We're going to talk about trial courts, magistrate and district. We're going to talk about judge and jury. We're going to talk about plaintiff versus defendant. We're going to talk about civil and criminal. Let's get to the civil and criminal first. In the law, a basic thing that is required is I owe you. I owe you. You owe me. We all owe each other a duty. D-U-T-Y, please. Okay? Duty, not D-O-O-D, anyway, whatever. Okay. A duty. And the basic duty is to be careful. I owe you a duty to be careful. Right? Actually, this is a good example in here. Do you owe a duty to the other people in this class to be careful? Yeah. Do you owe a duty to, not inadvertently spread asymptomatic COVID? Oh, okay, so we've identified a duty. All right? So you've got a duty. There we go. Everyone has duties to all kinds of people to be careful. A duty to be careful. Now, sometimes the duty is very, very specific. Like if you're driving on the street, sometimes the government might say, oh, don't just be careful, do not exceed whatever speed limit. Okay? Or do not operate a handheld phone device while you're sort of driving thing. Okay, yeah. They don't allow that. So sometimes it's just a simple duty of being careful. Sometimes there's a more specific requirement. So for example, in this school, if you took your mask off and you're like, heck with that, you don't have a doctor's excuse or something like that or whatever, and you're not on the list, that would be a breach of duty. Next thing, breach. We're not talking about childbirth here. Breach. It means to break. That's the second part. You need to have different elements, different component parts in order to win a lawsuit. So we're going to ultimately get down to winning a lawsuit here. Are you ready? You're like, lawsuits? Oh my gosh, this is serious. So everyone owes people various different duties to be careful. If you break that duty, you might be subject to a lawsuit. You have a duty to be careful to other people. If you break that duty and you, I don't know, do you need something else? Oh yeah. Cause harm. And actually, this slide is a little bit imperfect because it should be duty, breach, causation, harm, / injury, and then there's this thing at the bottom called damages, which I'll explain. You have to, if you're going to win a lawsuit, you have to show that person had a duty toward me, and that person breached that duty, and that person's breaching of that duty actually caused harm to me. Really? How much harm? A lot. Well, how much? Well, can we get a measurement of it? Let's put that in there. That helps you understand exactly what damages are. Do you understand that? Because it's like, oh, my feelings were hurt. Whoopee. Yeah, but I ended up in the hospital with a massive bill for therapy, and so, okay, fine. Okay? You got that? Duty, breach, causation, harm, injury. So, am I breaching any duties that I owe to any of you right now?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that was fast. What? Not maintaining 6 feet. It's only 3 feet now. What if I feel like, oh, I'm just going to do some baseball practice? Woo. It's signed by, look, it's signed by Robert Redford. See, it really is. It is. Yeah, haven't you ever seen The Natural? So if somebody were going out in the hallways of North Star, especially after today, and just swinging this around, would they potentially be breaching a duty of care to other people? If they hit someone, if this causes hitting someone, that's another issue. So if you got two people who are walking around swinging baseball bats, not paying attention to each other, who is liable? Write that word down. Liable. That's the key word we're looking for. Where did I put my thing? Oh, there it is. Liable. There is such a thing called civil liability, and then there's a thing called criminal liability. Okay, let's see. Yeah, civilly liable versus criminally liable, because we're going to distinguish between those two. If I am being not very careful and I cause harm to somebody else, sometimes people cause harm to each other. You could end up with a lawsuit where one person is suing one person and the other person is suing the other person right back. Do you understand that? It can get complicated, which is why you have to go to law school for 3 years in order to get some of that sorted out. Yeah, 3 years.
Only 3 years?
After 4 years of college. Got it? So, those sorts of things get sorted out. Now, one of the things that, as we look at this, do you understand that? Civil liability. I have breached a duty, therefore I have caused an injury to you, and that is measured in a dollar amount. And sometimes it's really hard to get the dollar amount. What is the value of the lost companionship of your parent or spouse or child? Well, I'll tell you what, the lawyer, whoa, he's getting right to it. Yeah.
What about a baby?
Yeah. So anyway, needless to say, lawyers will be arguing those kinds of issues to a jury during a trial. Okay? All right, so you understand that? So we have to put a dollar amount. Some of it is easy to establish, like, well, here's the hospital bills. Okay, fine, that was easy to figure out. But how do you measure, like, loss of companionship? That's a tough one, okay? But they measure it. If you got an airplane crashing into the ground and you have, like, 200 passengers dead, do you think there's going to be a lawsuit coming out of that? Well, I wonder who had a duty with it relative to that. Was the pilot? Well, the pilot's got a duty. Did the airline? Yeah, the airline. Did the mechanics in the airline? Yeah, there's all kinds of folks that could potentially have duties. So you could be a family member of somebody who was lost in that plane crash, and you bring a lawsuit against all the people who had a duty that may have violated that, causing the death of your family member. Dead people can't sue, but their survivors can. Okay? So they're going to sort all that out. Now, let's go ahead and let's expand this. Write this down. You ready? Criminal liability is more serious than civil liability. It's more serious. Why is it more serious? Because the consequences of losing in a criminal case could end up getting you in jail or executed. I just read in the newspaper today, there was this one guy who I've used his example, and I'm sure I will as well. He was a horrible, horrible person. He went in up North Idaho a long time ago, went into this family, killed a mom, killed her boyfriend, killed one of the sons, abducted the 2 small children, raped them both, killed the little boy, and then the girl managed to survive because he went to a Denny's in Coeur d'Alene and he was spotted by a waitress who called the police. He was found criminally guilty on, get this, state charges as well as federal charges. He was on death row. I think on state death row. I can't remember if he was on federal death row. But he was appealing his death. I mean, this happened like over 20 years ago. The case went on and on and on and on and on, but he's on death row. Eventually, he got cancer and died yesterday. Ooh, that's too bad. We'll get to that. Some people don't. I can't answer that very quickly. When I was a deputy prosecutor once upon a time, I didn't handle death penalty cases directly. That was for more senior people in the Ada County Prosecutor's Office. But I remember there was this one case, and I was able to give some help. Oh, this guy was awful. On State Street, there was a bar. He went in there. He thought some of the people were associated with some drug deal that he was like really confused in his head. Sorry, some of you guys are going to go, that's really scary that Mr. Hansen told a story about a baseball bat, having just put a baseball bat in his closet. Anyway, this guy took a baseball bat and decapitated the heads of two of the people, and I mean, it was awful. So here's the deal. This guy was found guilty. Okay? Shh. Yeah, really. I mean, it was like, hello, the evidence is pretty strong here. And he was given the capital punishment, the death penalty. And he didn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. So, as we'll see, didn't have to. He let the state do it. We'll see this as we go through the material here. He waived his right to appeal. So in other words, he said, I have a right to appeal this and this and this and have it go up through the court system and so forth. He's like, nah. And so he waived his appeal, and I want to say like within a year or so, he was executed. About 20 years. But I mean, some of the people who were put on death row like over 20 years ago, like the one woman who, like, let me see, there was some suspicious stuff that like she had killed her husband and kids in an arson, and then later that looked really, really bad because when she got remarried and had more kids, there was an arson that ended up killing her husband and 2 kids. The fire investigators put 2 and 2 together. Oh, by the way, she had insurance. They put all the information together, and it was like, let me see, when you do a CSI crime scene and you see like a whole bunch of burn spot in the carpet in the middle, that's usually because somebody's put an inflammant on the carpet in order to get the fire going while the husband and the kids are asleep upstairs in a 2-story townhouse. She was convicted of murder, put on death row. She's still on death row south of town in the Idaho State Penitentiary. And that case came up when I was a deputy prosecutor in the early 90s. So sometimes it takes a while on some of these kinds of cases, because you don't want to mess it up. I mean, capital punishment, can you go, oops, sorry. Well, just because you're guilty doesn't mean you're guilty. You can appeal up, because there's all kinds of various different things that need to be done right in cases. So courts are very, very careful. But it is frustrating, because it does seem to take a long, long time for some of those cases. Criminal liability, write this down. Criminal liability is going to potentially have a harsher consequence to the loser, the one who is found criminally liable. As in, raise your hand if you can tell me. It's a really easy word. What is another word for criminal liability? That person is guilty. Very good. Write that down. Guilty. Do not use that word when talking about civil liability. Civil liability, you would say the person is liable or negligent or tortious, but you don't say guilty. Guilty only is when you get a criminal verdict that the person has done something wrong. So with a baseball bat, do you think that maybe I potentially, if I was doing that in the hallway, I could be violating some criminal laws as well? Yeah. Yeah. And like cars are a good example. They really try to make it really clear exactly what you're supposed to do in a car. So if you don't do it right, then you're, like not paying attention. Is that a criminal offense? Yeah, it's called failure to pay attention. Yeah. Yeah. Okay? Yeah, I mean, lack of paying attention. So they've got all kinds of various different things. O.J. Simpson. I was bringing this one up because, and I did like the video before the break. O.J. Simpson, was he found criminally guilty of murdering his ex-wife and her friend? No. And here he is right after hearing the verdict with his top crack team of criminal defense attorneys. The jury found a reasonable doubt. In fact, let's get to this. Okay? Criminal liability. It all comes down to a burden of proof. You can write this down. We're jumping to that part because that just flows right for it. The burden of proof. If that person is going to be found guilty, the other side, the plaintiff, in this case, in a criminal case, it would be the state of Idaho or the United States of America for a federal case. The plaintiff brings charges, sues the defendant, and has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Have you heard those words before? Beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did it. And if the jury is like, well, beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did it, yeah, unanimous verdict. You can write that down. The jury would have to have all of them agree. Could be 12 on a jury. If it's a smaller case, a misdemeanor case, it would be 6. They all have to agree that the evidence is such that it is beyond a reasonable doubt. And we're like, well, what the heck are you talking about? I'll give you an example. If there are 10 reasonable explanations pointing to how the deaths of those 2 people and that O.J. Simpson is responsible for that, 10 out of 10 that all point to him doing it, he's guilty. But what if there's 9 out of 10? What if there was, and this is what the defense attorneys did a good job on. I mean, they took the facts of the case and they're like, oh, I see an opportunity. We have a detective. His name was Rob Furman. He was working for the Los Angeles Police Department. And he was a racist. And there was plenty of evidence that they could bring forth in the trial that he was a racist. And therefore, the criminal defense attorneys said, this detective has been tampering with the evidence so that a well-known, successful African-American athlete would be found guilty. He messed with the evidence. That was what one of the explanations was brought forward by the defense team. And they planted a seed of doubt. Well, most of the evidence seems to say that O.J. Simpson did it. But the jury's instructed, if there's like one reasonable explanation that points away from the defendant, what does the jury have to find? Not guilty. You got that?
They have to?
Yeah, that's what they're instructed. Now, of course, they're in the jury room. They're like, I don't know. I mean, they have lots of discussions and debates and so forth. Because you think you guys could, if we had 12 of you on like a case, in the O.J. Simpson case, do you think you would all agree? I mean, you sat through a multi-day trial. Would you all agree? Yeah. What if the judge said, you're not leaving the room until all of you agree, either not guilty or guilty? And you're like, oh, Judge, just order out some more food. We're good. We'll just kick this thing out. And then the judge is like, give them some bread and water. We'll see if we can get them to make a decision. And so, I mean, there's going to be pressures and so forth. If they ultimately, you can write this down, if a jury ultimately cannot agree in a criminal case, 100% guilty or 100% not guilty, it's called a hung jury. And that basically means a mistrial, which is a real hassle because then potentially you're going to do the whole trial again. In criminal cases, pretty much all throughout the country that I'm aware of, every place, because if you lose a criminal case, that's a big thing. You could go to jail, you could have money taken away from you, you could have your life taken away from you. So since the consequences are so big, they're going to say the state has to prove and convince all of the people in the jury. Make a note of this, though, because it's a good question. In civil cases, and Idaho is one of the states that does this, they only require like 3/4 of the jury to agree to a verdict. That kind of moves things along a bit. I'm really interested. Raise your hand if you can tell me, what case is Mr. Hansen paying attention to in the Midwest that is going on right now, a criminal case that has a lot of eyes of the country watching it? Do you know which one? No, it's not of the recent crimes. Some of those, I mean, they're building up. This was actually the alleged criminal activity took place last spring. Yes, the George Floyd one. George Floyd is obviously not. He's the victim in that. I think it's Officer Chavon is the name. of the, not Ivan, Siobhan. Yeah. Siobhan, who was the Minneapolis Police Department guy, the one who had his knee as he was arresting George Floyd. Anyway, so that trial is going on right now, and what are they going to need in order to get a conviction for something on Officer Siobhan? Unanimous verdict. Now, sometimes they have choices. They can be like, we're going to find him guilty first degree, or maybe not now second degree, or maybe manslaughter. And we'll give you some examples. So sometimes they have a choice, or not guilty at all.
And what do they do if one of the people on the jury is super biased, like brother or something? No, just huge benefit.
When we get to that, that actually takes place before, in the early stages of the trial. That's called jury selection. And if you actually have somebody who knows about the case, who is tied or connected to the case and so forth, they're usually dismissed. And even when I was doing jury trials and so forth, the jury selection process was always fascinating because they'll bring in a whole bunch of potential jurors. And we'll ask all kinds of questions. And then both sides, prosecution and then the defense team, they get to just sort of like go, nope, 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 nope. If you just don't get a good feel for one of the potential jurors, you can just knock them off. So what do you get when you're all said and done? You get the jury. So they'll bring in, like in Ada County, they bring in, I want to say, 50 or 60 or 70 people to bring it down to a 6-person misdemeanor jury with maybe an alternate, or 12-person felony jury with an alternate or two, because they go through that whole process. Question? Mm-hmm. That might be a little bit too... the attorney? Oh, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. The attorney, whatever. Yeah. What do you mean not be on the jury? What, do you don't want to fulfill a civic duty of participating in the criminal justice, civil justice system? What? You get free lunch, and you get reimbursement for your travel to and from, and about $10 a day. It's not much. It's not much. It's kind of a hassle. But sometimes, I'll give you an example. You ready? All right. Listen very carefully. Here is a story from Mr. Hansen's prosecutorial past. You raise your hand when the question... When I finish the scenario, as to whether you think Mr. Hansen should bump this person off the jury or should not bump this person off the jury. You ready? This was a felony case that I did. The person was charged with felony DUI. Okay? 3rd time DUI within 5 years. Okay? All right? Okay, yeah. And of course, you can't talk about the 2 previous ones in the trial because people are going to go, well, if they did 2 before, yeah. So we couldn't talk about those 2 previous ones. But if we did find them guilty for this time, and then we go, Your Honor, this is the 3rd one in 5 years, felony DUI, guilty. He worked for the post office. And one of the potential jurors knew him. He delivered mail to her. And in the questioning that we did, it determined that, she thought he was a nice guy, kind of an older guy. And, yeah. She also did say, upon questioning, that she felt she could follow the instructions of the court and keep an open, objective mind during the case and give her opinion as to whether or not she felt like the evidence was there, reasonable doubt or not reasonable doubt. You understand? You have enough information? All right, raise your hand if you think Mr. Hansen should bump the lady off the jury. Use a peremptory challenge. Okay, raise your hand if you think, no, Mr. Hansen should keep her on. She said she could follow the rule. Oh. Well, here's a couple things. And, of course, there's a bit of an advantage because I was in the courtroom and I had a chance to sort of size her up. She seemed like a very neat, nice lady, and she seemed very honest. And I won the case. And she was on the jury. I did not bump her. In fact, it played into my theory of the case. My theory of the case was when he was sober during the daytime delivering mail, he was a really nice guy and so forth, not a danger to anybody. But the facts of the case that was being presented by witnesses, particularly the police, would show that he was under the influence of alcohol. He was a different person. And so I took a chance. But it worked out because I think she was fair. Here's another scenario. See if you can bump this person or not. You ready? Another DUI case. This woman was from Hungary, I think it was, or Czechoslovakia. She had emigrated to this country from the time when the communists were in charge in Eastern Europe. Remember that whole communist thing in charge and so forth? She came to this country. I want to say she had lost one of her children to a drunk driver who was killed. And I'm like, raise your hand. Do you think I should have this woman on my jury? I'm the prosecutor.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. Yeah. Because why? What do you think she's got an attitude against drunk drivers?
I mean,
Well, obviously, her kid was killed by a drunk driver, and yet it was a very close case. It was one of those ones where, at the time, the legal limit for alcohol in the blood system was 0.10. Now it's like 0.08 or something. It's like much lower. And the breathalyzer test that the officer did at the time was like 0.10, 0.10. And so the defense attorney was making an argument that, well, depending on how the equipment was, it could be either slightly off one way or slightly off the other way. Yeah, so I mean, they were sort of like, yeah, of course we're going to take this to trial because the jury might find a reasonable doubt. And our office's policy was not to plead out any of those. By pleading out as in, like, accept a guilty plea on a lesser charge, like inattentive driving, as opposed to a DUI. I didn't bump her off the jury. I was like, yeah, I'm just like you guys. I'm like, yeah, she should be on the jury. We lost the case. Wasn't surprised, okay? I wasn't surprised. And yet, it was interesting because talk to the jurors afterwards. They can talk to you afterwards. It's their choice. And she said, yeah, when she was growing up, the government that was in charge, if they charged you with a crime, you were guilty. And the police and the government, you know, they basically said, this is the way things are, and you're guilty, you're guilty, you're guilty. That's the way they operate in communist dictatorial countries. They don't have trials with a real opportunity for somebody to be found not guilty. They don't hold the government up to the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. So that was going through her mind and her experience. She held our Ada County government to a very high standard on that. And so she came in and said, along with the other people, she was a leader for find the person not guilty. It's a very interesting situation. O.J. Simpson, you can write him down as a loser in the civil case. I like to bring this example up because there's a lot of different intricacies and so forth that go on especially when we get to like the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Like, do you have to answer the questions at a trial? No, you got a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. What if the police ask you a whole bunch of questions? You have to remain silent. O.J. Simpson, did he testify in his trial? No, he pled the Fifth. In his criminal trial, he pled the Fifth. He's got a right to do that. The only time he actually sort of squeezed away from that was when his defense attorneys took out the gloves that were found at the scene that supposedly were used by the criminal, and then he had O.J. try them on, and he's like, they don't fit. As in to say, these couldn't have been O.J. Simpson's glove. It must have belonged to somebody else. Therefore, somebody else had committed the crime. Although the prosecution was basically like saying the material in the gloves had shrunk. Oh, and by the way, does anything change about the volume of your hands depending on where you keep them 10 minutes prior to trying on gloves? Oh, you got to be pretty smart to do this job. So if you keep your hands down, they will be more full and therefore harder to fit in. If you keep them up, they won't be. But you're not going to sit around in court like this. You're going to sit around like this.
I plead.
I plead. So, yeah, he didn't say anything. But he was sued. You can write this down. O.J. Simpson was sued afterwards in civil court. Because you could be dealing with criminal liability for the same set of facts that you could be dealing with